After losing the first game of the new year, the Cavs have since gone 15-1. There's no team playing better basketball. They've shot up the standings all the way to number 2, despite dealing with multiple injuries, a suspension, and it begs the question, just how good can they be at full strength? The catalyst behind this recent success has been some incredible defense. Over those last 16 games, they have held opponents to under 106 points every 100 possessions, while the league average has been over 117. That's almost 12 points better. And even crazier, most of that stretch has been played without Evan Mobley, a Defensive Player of the Year finalist. Replacing Mobley in the lineup has been Dean Wade. You've got to make up for the loss of size, and at 6'9", he's another body you can throw in the paint. He's also very mobile, meaning that on a play like this where he helps on Giannis, he's quick enough to recover to Lopez on the perimeter, running him off the line with the size to keep him away from the basket. This one starts with him chasing his man around a handoff to deny the ball. Then when Johnson gets it, he completely smothers him and forces a turnover. The combination of size and quickness kind of makes him a defensive Swiss Army knife for them. You need him matching up with guards, bigger forwards, he can do it. And when the Bulls went to a double big lineup of Drummond and Vooch, he had to defend in the pick and roll, where he executes drop coverage to near perfection, forcing a pass and recovering to shut off the paint, which results in a turnover. When defending screeners, he's got the tools to execute different coverages. This time you're going to see Isaac Okoro ice the action, forcing Trey baseline, while Wade shows to the ball with the agility to get back in front of his man for a stop. Speaking of Okoro, he's their go-to guy at the point of attack, and he's one of those wings that won't rack up a ton of steals or blocks, but just checks most of the boxes when it comes to individual matchups. He's quick laterally and has great length, so it's tough to beat him off the dribble. He's also really good at dodging screens and is a quick leaper off of 2 feet, so slashers who want to turn the corner have trouble scoring. And in addition to all of that, despite standing 6'5", he's really sturdy, so if absolutely necessary, he can play bigger than his position. The combination of Okoro's strength and Wade's quickness unlocks some switchability for the Cavs. Pretty much anytime Okoro's man is used as the screener, they just seamlessly switch to prevent any advantage. And it's the exact same thing when Wade's man is screening. He picks up Trey, who thinks he now has an advantage to ISO, but that just isn't the case. While Wade and Okoro are fine switching onto each other's matchups, they're often sharing the floor with weaker links who the offense wants to hunt. And for those guys, they aren't going to give up the switch, but instead play a hedge and recover. It doesn't matter if it's Sam Merrill, George Niang, Donovan Mitchell, or Darius Garland when he's playing, that guy's gonna jump out, show his body, and recover to his man so that they can keep the matchups they want. Here's one that starts with Kawhi trying to get the switch onto Mitchell. Donovan jumps way out and shows his length, while Wade stays in front of the ball. And the action was pointless because you end up with Kawhi isolating his original defender. He doesn't create any space and looks to pass, but Okoro jumps the lane. Executing these show and recover plays requires good positioning and timing. Okoro's glued to the screen, so Mitchell continues to stay in front of the ball while he gets back in the play. And when Paolo gets to the rim, that's when Jarrett Allen makes his presence known. Allen is the anchor. The reason they're able to do most of the things they do comes back to his ability to protect the paint. He's not a guy who's going to block 3 shots a game or end up on a defensive highlight reel, but he's got incredible length, is quick on his feet, and is pretty much always in perfect position. Here's a play that starts with Okoro getting beat off the dribble, and when Allen comes to help, he seamlessly peels onto the big man. Now, I mentioned his strength and how he can match up with bigger guys, but the lack of height still means that they have access over the top of him. Not with Allen there though. It feels like his skill set was made in a lab with the goal of executing drop coverage. There aren't many guys better at defending the pick and roll. But as I mentioned, he moves really well for his size, so when it's necessary, he can switch onto wings. And I'm not just talking about once or twice a game, he more than holds his own on the perimeter. With that said, I talked about how they don't want to give up favorable matchups for the offense, and oftentimes Allen switching means that you're leaving someone else in a mismatch. So it all comes back to executing the right coverage at the right time. And I'm not sure I've ever seen a team that's as cohesive as these Cavs. Remember, Dean Wade can play big, so whenever he's the one getting screened, him and Allen will switch. Wade's not a mismatch because of his size, and we just talked about Allen's ability to defend in space. It's not just the fact that they can switch, but how perfectly executed it is. There's not even a breath of fresh air for the ball handler by the time Allen's jumping out to him, and again, there's no advantage to attack. As for everyone else on the roster, that switch is not happening. Even with Strus getting absolutely bricked walled by this screen, Allen's gonna come up high to take away a jumper, but he's still dropping back to the roll. Strus recovers, back to square one. And this time Allen's already switched onto Harden. When PG comes to get it off a handoff, he is not switching with Strus. From there, Max does a great job of defending George in isolation. More times than not, Allen wants to sit back in that drop coverage, and man do they execute this perfectly. Okoro goes over the top of the screen while Allen sits in front of the ball, and as soon as it gets moved to Portis, he recovers to not give up a three. Then Bobby tries to take him off the dribble, doesn't create anything, and Okoro slides down to force a turnover. Here's one that starts with Mitchell at the point of attack, Allen dropping, and Wade sinking from the weak side wing to tag, before jumping into a passing lane. Everything I've talked about works together. First, it's Wade getting screened by a guard at the point of attack, and Merrill jumps out to show before recovering. Then they move the ball up top for a second action with Merrill's man receiving a handoff, and Allen comes up in a high drop to take away a pull-up before showcasing some more of that mobility against a drive. Or how about this one? Wade and Mitchell do not switch the initial handoff. Allen recognizes that it's a Spain pick and roll and makes sure to avoid the second screen while Okoro jumps in front of the ball. It doesn't get much better. That's a perfect transition into my next point. The fact that anytime someone gets hit by a screen or gets beat off the dribble, there's always another guy sliding down. They've implemented a tactic of having the weak side guy rotate early, and the goal is to meet attackers on the strong side block. Here's one that starts with Giannis attacking Allen out in space, and while that's going down, Niang's moving on a string to beat him to that left block where he draws a charge. It doesn't matter who's down there, they're always coming over. This one starts with the switch between Wade and Okoro to not give up a lane, but look at Mitchell. He's waiting on the block and steals a pass to a cutter. Or you've got a high pick and roll against Dame, where Allen's forced to come up to the level to not give up a three, and when he turns the corner, here comes Mitchell to get in front of him, allowing Okoro to recover. The key here is that the defense moves on a string. Everyone's bought in, nobody's missing a rotation, and the scramble is just perfect. Mitchell comes over from the weak side wing, Strus slides up to play in between two shooters, and everyone recovers to their original assignment without giving up a high quality opportunity. It's gotta be demoralizing for an attacker to have to beat Okoro off the dribble only to get met by Allen at the rim, and when they try to hit their big, here comes Mitchell to snatch it away. Despite not having a ton of size, Mitchell's super effective in these spots because of his absurd 6'10" wingspan. He can eat up space and makes passes really difficult. Everything I've talked about up to this point comes back to the fact of how hard it is to create advantages against this defense. The pick and roll coverages are executed to perfection, you can't hunt for a mismatch because they won't give it up, and anytime you do get into the paint, there's another defender waiting to rotate over. So what ends up happening is that they force teams to live in isolation, which typically isn't a great recipe to success. There's really only one other thing to talk about, the return of Evan Mobley. Obviously, Wade was replacing him due to injury, and he's been a big key in unlocking some of Cleveland's tactics. Mobley moves really well for his size, but he doesn't give you the same type of perimeter defense as Wade, so I think you lose a legit option at the point of attack. With that said, he still allows for that switchability with Allen between the 4 and 5, and he's a way better rim protector, so you're getting some of that back. Actually, that brings up a really important factor. The big difference with having Mobley instead of Wade is the non-Allen minutes. Wade can't play the 5 full time, so they had to rely on Tristan Thompson or Damian Jones when Allen was off the floor. But Mobley's a legit all-defensive caliber big on his own. So what I'd expect them to do is start and close with the Mobley-Allen pairing, but in between stagger them as much as possible. When Allen's on the floor, he'll be next to Wade, and that leaves Mobley with all the backup 5 minutes. All that's to say, this defense isn't going anywhere. They have weak links, but do everything in their power to cover them up while being scheme flexible. And everyone has bought in, so come playoff time, it's going to be really hard to score on them. What I'm more worried about with the return of Mobley is how that impacts the offense. Their approach is very Mitchell-centric, which of course means lots of spread pick and roll. It's simple. If the big sits back in drop coverage, he's stepping into one of his lights-out pull-up threes. And as soon as a big comes up to meet him early, he's using his running back-esque physical tools to put pressure on the rim. In other words, more times than not, teams are going to put 2 on the ball, which is where Jarrett Allen's skill set comes into play. If a wing rotates down but he catches the ball in close, he's got the size and touch to punish the mismatch. But if he gets the ball in the short roll and gets met by help early, he's also a good enough passer to make that read and create a good look for a teammate. And in the event that the weak side low man rotates down before the roll ever materializes, that's when Mitchell will fire a skip pass to the corner, creating an open 3 himself. These simple pick and rolls show why it's imperative to surround Mitchell with as much shooting as possible, which is exactly what they've done. They went out and got Max Strus and Georges Niang in the offseason, 2 very good shooters, to go along with guys like Garland or LeVert, who have also proven that you can't leave them open. In addition to those names, Isaac Okoro, who was viewed as a complete non-spacer, is shooting a career-high 38% from 3, including 40% off the catch, capitalizing on those corner opportunities. And he's always had a pretty nice slashing game, so in the event that he catches with a lane to attack, that's another layer to this Cleveland offense. The big thing I want to talk about though is the difference between Mobley and Wade. Mobley just straight up doesn't shoot threes. It's not part of his game. So when he's on the floor with Allen, that's 2 non-shooters, which really clogs up Mitchell's driving lanes. But Wade, on the other hand, is shooting 40% from 3. And I'm not just talking about stationary corner looks. He's relocating, drawing closeouts, and taking advantage of flybys. So when he replaces Mobley, they get this 4-out, 1-in look that takes Mitchell's game to another level. I started with talking about the pick and roll. When he gets into the defense, having a guy like Strus who can fill out space and knock down a 3 on the move is huge. It's not just the pick and roll though. He's a nightmare to contain one-on-one when given that much space, with the shooting threat, burst, and handle to utilize all 3 levels effectively. When you can't stop a guy from touching the paint, and bringing help results in whatever you want to call this pass, if the ball finds a great shooter, your defense has some problems. The craziest part? I haven't even mentioned their best shooter, Sam Merrill. With the recent injuries, he's seen an increase to his minutes, and his shooting numbers will actually blow your mind. Every 75 possessions, he attempts 12.5 threes. No, that's not a typo, and he's shooting 49% off the catch. Do you know how absurd that is? The reason he's able to get so many shots up despite playing off ball is because he's more than comfortable shooting through impossibly tight windows while moving in either direction. You get the idea. So when he's on the floor, one thing the Cavs really like to do is use him as the ball screener. That way, if the defense gives up a switch, all of a sudden Mitchell's got a favorable matchup in isolation. Good luck. And remember I talked about how the Cavs will hedge and recover screens from guards? Well, other defenses try that too, but the difference is that for the very slight moment Merrill's left open, it's basically like giving up a layup. Just look at this one. He doesn't even set the screen, just running through, and Cole Anthony shows for not even a fraction of a second. That's all the space he needs to catch, turn, and fire. Because they have so many capable shooters, they'll use the gravity of that movement to set up Mitchell's pick and rolls. This one starts with a little give and go, then screen from Strus, which forces 2 to the ball and leaves Max with room to comfortably catch and shoot. And this one starts with Strus coming off a pin down, but that doesn't create any advantage, so he keeps moving into a cross screen for Mitchell, who's gonna then set up the 2-man game. Gafford's back and drop, so he steps into a real easy triple. Plays like those really highlight how although the Cavs run a lot of pick and roll, it's not some stationary, stand around and watch Spida go to work type of approach. Their offense is very free-flowing, with lots of ball movement, screening, and running around. That last play I talked about started with Strus running off a pin down. Option 1 in that scenario is one of his moving threes. Same thing for Merrill. He'll come off screens or handoffs, where I'm not sure he's ever missed a shot. And that goes for LeVert. He gets the dribble handoff, nobody comes out to meet him, and he's got himself a clean look from deep. Usually the recipient of these handoffs is Mitchell though. It's another way for them to set up that 2-man game, where once again it helps to have shooting on the floor. And here's one that starts with a similar setup. Except Mitchell rejects the handoff and cuts back to the 3-point line, finding some room to catch and shoot himself. When they're not setting up their pick and roll game, the ball's likely running through Allen in the middle. They really like to set up these Chicago actions, which is a pin down for a player to receive a dribble handoff. The thing is, when the action gets fronted and a backdoor cut is available, Allen's a good enough passer to take advantage. And in the event that these screening actions actually don't lead to any openings, he's also a skilled enough scorer to put it down himself and show off that touch around the rim. Of course, the key to running this style of offense is that the guys running around are actually threats to shoot. But it also requires that these players to be capable ball handlers. And when I say they all are, I mean it. This one starts with a down screen into a handoff for Merrill, and I know I focused on the shooting. He can also put it down and whip a one-handed skip pass to Dean Wade in the opposite corner. This next play starts in the hands of Mitchell, but not to set up a pick and roll, instead initiating while Strus and Allen set up a flare screen. From there they turn it into a pick and roll, and Strus hits Allen for some float game. The list goes on and on. You've got Caris LeVert, who's a skilled enough ball handler to apply pressure, and genuinely might be the most underrated passer in the league. I don't even think I need to talk about Darius Garland, as he made an all-star game based on his ability to create. And all that's to say they've got options. This play starts with Merrill setting a back screen for Wade, which the Hawks defend really well. And with no advantage, Allen's gonna then move towards the corner to hand it off to Strus. He drives and takes it all the way to the rim for 2. I keep going back to those last 16 games. Over that stretch, they've had a 122 offensive rating, 6th in the NBA. They're 1st in shot quality, 4th in 3-point attempts, and 5th in percentage. I mean, everything points to this being a high-powered offense, yet I'm concerned for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I kind of addressed the Mobley issue, but I really want to harp on that for a sec. He isn't a shooter, so right away you're losing that spread floor setup. And I also don't quite know how he fits into the free-flowing style that they've been running. You can't spot him up, so do they put him in the dunker spot? He's a good enough passer to initiate in the middle, but isn't nearly as good as Allen at rolling or finishing, so it almost feels like you have to lose a key function to fit another piece. I'm also worried about Okoro's ability to stay on the floor. He's hitting his threes right now, and as long as that continues, you don't have any issues. But how sustainable is it? Because in the playoffs, teams will definitely make him knock down shots. If you have to reduce both Okoro and Mobley's minutes, how much defense are you sacrificing? Then you have the Darius Garland question mark. It sounds insane because he's very clearly the second best offensive player on the team and one of the better guards in the league, but I'm more so referring to how his return affects the offense's tendencies. What I mean is that although he's shown to be a seamless fit into the movement offense, he still has to get his touches in the pick and roll, which means one of two things. Either he's taking the ball out of Mitchell's hands for a few possessions, or they're not going to the motion as much. With that said, remember the Mobley and Allen dynamic I talked about on defense? Specifically how Mobley fills a void that they desperately needed whenever Allen left the floor? It's the exact same thing here. The offense has been completely collapsing whenever Mitchell sits down, and having a guy like Garland to stagger and continue driving the ship forward can go a long way. That takes us to the hard part. Just how good is this team? Well, for one, they have the third best net rating against top 10 opponents at plus 2.4, behind just the Celtics and Bucks. That's fueled by their defense, holding top 10 offenses to 113 points every 100 possessions, second in the NBA. The defense is real. That's not going anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if they have the best playoff defense, just grueling out series after series. But I also wouldn't be surprised if a team like Boston or New York found a way to completely shut down their offense and force them into making tough decisions with Mobley and Okoro's minutes. All things considered, I think there's a pathway to a deep playoff run here. If Mitchell and Garland are clicking and they surround those two with as much shooting as possible without losing anything defensively, the offense should translate much better than it did last year. The recipe for success is so obvious. Even a competent offense to go along with that defense is enough to make a run at the title. We've seen it happen before. And the recipe for failure is also obvious. An offensive collapse against a high-level defense and another early exit. Which of the two will we see? Well, we've got less than 3 months until we find out. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of the Cavs. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.